Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you guys for being here on the panel. You guys at home, thank you for joining us. Today, we are going to talk about mobile homes, land versus park, and how they differ, how you get financing, title work, all of that fun stuff. So we have three great guys here to help answer lots of questions. So we're going to kick it off with asking them a bunch of different questions on the hot seat, and then we'll open it up to you guys at home to ask them a bunch of stuff as well. So if at any time you guys at home can't hear, just, raise your hand and whatnot. We'll make certain we crank the speaker up in the back and blast out the ladies sitting beside it. So, okay, who wants to go first? Who are you?
I'm Jason Malott, Mobile Home Settlements.
I am Gary News with Cross Country Mortgage.
Chris Deardorff, apparently there's something about mobile homes.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. All right. So first question, what can possibly go wrong when selling a mobile home?
If you do your homework, you won't run into issues. If you reach out to the right people, you won't run into issues. If you try and do it on your own and never have done it before, you're gonna crash and burn. So, that being said, there's a bunch of things to look for both sides, listing and buying agents. When you go into a listing and you're looking at this mobile home, and you do your walk around, buying agents listen to this too. Walk the perimeter of the home, walk along the walls.
Jason, are you plugged in? Is your mic
I
plugged
think
in?
so.
Yeah, we can hear you back here now.
So yeah, as you walk through the home, your doors, walk underneath your windows, like walk right along the wall, the crease of the wall, because they are known to leak. Walk through your kitchen, walk in the bathroom, try and step close to the toilet, take your soft spots. Mobile homes are known for issues with floors, and people will try and cover them up with rugs and things like that. So make yourself aware of it, so when it comes time for inspections, when it comes time for the final walkthrough, and they're saying, oh, these floors are all rotten, you're already aware, you're already addressed it, it's out there in the open, so you can move forward from there. Same with the buyer side, that way you can kind of point it out to your folks. Skylights leak. As you're walking through that home, take a look at your skylights, because I guarantee you can probably find some water. Okay? Other things to be aware of, to ask. You're on the buyer side, you're taking them through. Check with them to make sure the license is good. So you don't get to the settlement table and, oh, it expires in a month. Okay, that's not gonna work. So that way you can address it ahead of time, get the new license in place, ready to roll.
Wait, what do you mean new license? I don't even know.
New driver's license, new ID.
Oh, that license.
Yeah.
Can
You want at least 3 to 4 months left on that license.
Jason, can you explain why? Because it's a little different with
So-
mobile homes.
With mobile homes in Pennsylvania, you have to provide some kind of valid ID that gets sent in with the title to PennDOT. I verify it through their online system ahead of time. And then they will also verify it. They need that to transfer the title. Without it, they won't go. Check your sellers too. Make sure they're good. That way everything can get notarized. Because you can't notarize off an expired ID.
Okay.
Or probably more. I'll think about it. I'll let you guys talk for a while.
But, from a lending standpoint, number one, you gotta make sure you know the age of the
speaker.
property. That's a big one. You're gonna wanna start, you wanna determine, is it a single wide or a double wide? Because different lenders are gonna have different standards and overlays as to whether they'll do a single wide, versus a double wide. I know we're gonna talk about this, but you gotta start researching, the title. Was there a title issued? Was it retired? You're gonna want to start having discussions about what type of additional inspections, in addition to the normal ones, are we going to have? We're gonna have an appraisal done. Do I need to have a structural inspection? Do I need to have a septic or a water test? You want to kind of take a look and see, are the HUD tags in place? So I know these are all things we're gonna talk about, but you know, from a lending standpoint, those are gonna be the things that we're gonna look for. And, you know, one of the reasons over these years that I've really gotten into kind of mobile home lending, you know, in addition to other things. So some of my prospecting has been calling agents that have mobile homes listed and just talking to them and asking them, have you ever done this before? And a lot of times it's no, you know, so you can just be, you know, a resource to make sure that you're not going to run into something that you're not going to be able to overcome, you know, as you get closer to settlement. So.
So a lot of my agents already know this. I've been dealing with a mobile home sale since 2022. So in June 1st, it'll be 2 years. And when I took on this listing, I asked the agent or the client, I said, is this a mobile or a modular? They passed the waters, and she said, oh, it's definitely modular. But when I went underneath the home, it was on a permanent foundation that had frame rails. Right away, it's to me, it's a mobile home. So I'm looking for the HUD tag, which is around the hot water heater, under the kitchen sink, maybe next to the electrical panel. There was nothing. So I'm assuming that it's been retired. She bought it from Grandma. You know, Grandma's dead and gone. So we find out as soon as we get under the contract, it goes to a lender, not this gentleman, but it goes to a lender. The lender says right away, this is a mobile, which I knew that it was a mobile, but my client was adamant and I wanted the listing. I wasn't gonna argue. Get the listing, I'll argue later. So it turns out that it was a mobile and the title was never transferred when she bought it from Grandma back in 2017. And there was a lien against it that they never resolved the lien back then. Well, Grandma died. So we had to go to court and it's been 2 years. We finally got the title into my client's name with a court order. Then we had to get the lien removed, and the lien was with a company that is no longer in business. Green Tree Discount Company is gone. They sold their holdings to another company who went out of business. So mobiles can turn into a huge mess. You think it might be simple, but it's like selling a car without a title. You can't just sell your car without a title. It has to go through certain steps. And that's what Jason deals with and why he's bringing up the issues he deals with when it gets to his plate as to what are you going to encounter. Well, we finally got all that resolved. It's been a year and a half. Well, because it took so long, now the financing won't go through because interest rates went up over the past 2 years. So we had to switch to FHA. Now we need to make sure that the home is strapped down. So we had to dig holes under the frame rails and get it all done. My client has spent probably about $10,000 between attorney fees, strapping this thing down, and we just got it done, had it inspected last week. We're headed to settlement, knock on wood. But it's been a challenge. So when you walk, like Jason had said, when you walk that home, look for those frame rails. If there's frame rails, it's a trailer, mobile home. And how many of us have sold homes where they built a stick-built house around a mobile? It's still a mobile. That just introduces all kinds of problems when this gets to the lending situation. So make sure you're looking for those things and asking questions before you get it under contract.
What do you mean by frame rails? Like, what are we looking for? Explain what that looks like.
So if you go in the basement of your house, most of us have basements, you'll see floor joists, wood running back and forth that supports your floor, right? But for a trailer, they don't have they don't have wood.
There's no wood. It's
No
all
wood.
metal.
It's two rails that run from front to rear. And if it's a double wide, you'll have two sets because they haul these in on a trailer. And the reason there's a title involved is PennDOT requires it to have a license or a tag for them to transport it across our roadways. And if you don't have that, if the title's been retired, that home can never move across the highways again. The only thing you can do with it is scrap it if it becomes inhabitable. So you're looking for those frame rails, crawl underneath, get underneath. Real estate's not always. So sometimes we gotta put our high heels away. I don't wear any, but Christy does. And get underneath the home and look and see what are you actually dealing with.
I was just gonna think of it, I have a great example. If, you know, after today, search 690 Williamson Road down in Greencastle. You know, pull that up as the MLS. I had a listing agent and a potential buyer for it, and the listing agent was adamant it was a modular home. But to Chris's point, there was a photo right on the listing and you can, in the basement, and you can see the steel frame. And you can actually see the hooks, which denote really where the wheels and the axles were attached. And I said, well, what's that steel frame where the axles were? And then she said, what? I'm like, okay. I was like, you can call it a module, you know, and I'm a big believer of the old adage, you know, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck, you know. And unfortunately, some people don't want to listen, and my folks decided not to buy it. And it's still in the market, and they're still adamant that it's modular. And if the appraiser is doing their job and they go out there and they look at that, they're gonna say it's a manufactured home and it's gonna cause, and it's pre-1976, which we'll get into, and it's gonna be a whole thing, so.
Yeah.
But if you want a good example, pull that listing up, find the picture in the basement and you'll see the frame.
Okay, so
Joseph had a question.
Yeah, Chris, as a new agent, I am curious. I don't understand some of these things all the way yet. But how long approximately have you been working with this client, the one you talked about?
It went under listing in April or May of 2022, went under contract pretty quickly. Since that client has gotten orders with the military, they're in San Diego now. So what happened with that buyer, the buyer wanted to buy it. They needed to get their child into a school. So they're renting this property for the past year and a half. So they became renters or tenants. So we did a whole lease. And, you know, they're very lucky that myself and the agent on the other side have stuck with this deal, because a lot of agents would have just given up a long time ago. We've fought tooth and nail to get information, make sure we understand what's going on. And one of the people that I've used as a mentor, so to speak, and Jason will know her, is Janice Kimball. Janice Kimball was like
she is the queen of mobile homes.
Of knowledge, and I called her on several occasions, even though she's at another brokerage. Other real estate agents that have experience will give you that information. They'll help you out. She was a big help in pushing me in the right direction, because I never dealt with somebody that passed away that we didn't have a title for. So, and then we had to, you know, find an attorney and go through all their steps. So it was quite involved.
So the agency agreement had to be extended. You kept extending.
Oh, our admin Diane has, you know, we have extensions right about 15.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Okay, so to piggyback off of what Gary had started to talk about, how can you tell the difference when it's on a piece of land between a mobile home and a modular home? So let's keep in mind, we as real estate agents, when we are inputting a listing, the MLS gives us an option to choose manufactured home or mobile home. A lot of people think they are one and the same. How can we tell the difference as real estate professionals to be able to say, we know that this is not going to have a title because it's a modular home, or it is in fact a mobile, so we need to do our due diligence to ensure that it's got a title or the title's been retired?
Mobile homes are steel underneath. That's the best way to tell.
Mhm.
A modular is wood. Modulars are brought in on backs of trucks in sections and built on site. Mobile homes are entirely factory built. They come with wheels, they come with hitches. It's a trailer. Don't call it that. But essentially that's what it is. So you can tell really quickly when you get underneath and take a look, you'll see that. Another thing to look for, it's not always the case, but mobile homes have skirting, which is that plastic corrugated stuff that goes the whole way around the bottom, keep the wind out, keep the critters out. It shatters really quickly when you're using a weed whacker, so don't hit it with that. But that encloses the bottom of it. Your modulars are sitting on some kind of block foundation or something along those lines, or they're sitting on pad. The only thing to really watch for, if you get into retirement communities, 55 and over, a lot of those are mobile homes that are sitting on slabs. So they look like a regular stick-built ranch house.
Mhm.
They are not. They have titles.
Okay, so let's take that question one step further. What if they put it on a piece of land, they put it on a foundation, and then they finish the basement? So now we can't see if it's wood or if it's metal. How do we know?
Look at the pitch of the roof.
Yeah.
That's where you can tell, because there's not much slope to them. You start seeing a higher slope, it's more than likely stick built. But they
Roof
haven't-
pitch, 312 is normal on mobiles. You can have a 312 on a stick built, but they normally start at 512 and go on up to, if you want a church steeple kind of place, you can go at a 1212 pitch.
Yep.
That's the first thing I look at. If I go into a property where I think I have any question, is I'll look at the roof pitch, and then I look at the room dividers down the middle of the property.
Yep. So what MJ is saying is when you pull up to a property, if it has a much lower sloped roof, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a mobile home. The higher
Yep.
the pit, the higher the steeple, it's probably a stick built or a modular home. So that should be one of your first signs to start looking for your steel foundation, your HUD tags, things along those lines.
You know,
So,
furnaces sometimes will give that away too. A mobile home furnace looks like it's a modular, very small unit, as opposed to something that has like oil burning furnace or, it just looks completely different. It has vents on the outside of the door. If you've ever been in a mobile home, you know what a mobile home furnace looks like.
Where you might run into problems prior to 1976, HUD had nothing to do with mobile homes. In 1976, that's when HUD came along and started regulating the production of mobile homes to bring them up to standards. So they don't have HUD plates before 1976. Literally, that plate is to signify that this home was HUD inspected and approved. So prior to that, there was a hybrid. I've only ever seen one in my life that had an attic, that had a full basement, that the pitch on the roof was different because again, there was nobody was looking at these homes saying, yeah, that's okay. No, you can't do that.
Right.
So those get a little tricky. So just something to keep an eye out for.
I don't know. We keep talking about a HUD plate. Can you define what that is?
It's a little plate about this big.
you know, that's on my list of questions that I'm asking the panel.
On outside of the vehicle. In order for that vehicle to be financed, it has to have that HUD plate, okay? If you want to see pictures, come up afterwards. I have pictures on my phone I can show you. But it's just like a little metal plate that has a whole bunch of information in there, and it has like the HUD approval number in there. The lenders are gonna need that. You don't need it for a cash sale, but do everybody a favor, if it's missing one, I think they're about $75 to replace it. I can get you the email address for it. Send it off, get a new one, put it on there.
And that's been-
Right.
Yeah.
I was
So,
gonna ask that question. What does that mean, retired?
well, let's talk about that. So what if what if the seller can't locate the title? How do we know if it's been retired? What does retired mean? Like what are the steps?
So when you retire a title, you are taking that personal property, because that's what a mobile home is. It is personal property and it's taxed like personal property. And you are converting it to real estate. That's the whole process of retiring the title. I own 15 acres of land. I'm gonna go off grid. I bought this mobile home, bring it on, set it down. I then retire that title, which turns it from the mobile home into real estate. And then it becomes part of that property.
So you can only do that on land, not
On land, you
park.
cannot do that in a park.
Yeah, because one of the tenets of that is once that title is retired and that home is set,
Mhm.
you are basically saying that this home will never be moved.
Okay, right.
And one of the things from a lending standpoint is, and it's all within the guidelines, whether it's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, has this home ever been moved? Okay, and because really, if an underwriter gets any inclination or wind that the property's been moved, then you're gonna run into a problem. So, you know, on loans typically where I have to have a structural inspection, I have a guy that I use, and he always puts verbiage in there that, to the best of his knowledge, the home has always been there and hasn't been anywhere else. And, you know, my underwriters generally will take that because it came from somebody else.
That means then they can do FHA and all.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. How about, what if it's in a mobile home park and they do not have a title? How do we go about, how do you get a title? What's the process? Because you have to have it in order to sell.
So if you've ever used me for settlements and been on the seller side, As soon as I get the contract from the buyer, my first question to the seller is, do you have the title? If not, where is it? So when you go listers, when you go in there and you're having your interview with the clients, get a copy of that title. That way you got it. There's a lot of pertinent information on there, the title number, the VIN number, make and year, all things that I need right up front. Check that title, make sure there's no defects, there's no misspellings, things like that. If your title looks like it's been through Vietnam and back, go to PennDOT, get a new title, because they will not accept it. And I will look at it and be like, yeah, go to PennDOT, get a new one. Where was I going with that? Lost my train of thought. So yeah, if you don't have one, one of two things happen. Either they lost it or there's a lien on it. So when you call up Gary and he does a mortgage on a title on a mobile home in a park, that title gets sent electronically to the bank or in a paper form if you're dealing like Bank of Landisburg. Paper goes to the bank and they hold it. And it gets printed right on the title that there's a lien. So don't think that your seller can go down to PennDOT with a lien on their title and say, hey, can I get a new title? They're gonna be like, no. Well, no, they'll print it first and give you the false hope and then say, oh, there's a lien on it. And then they run it right through the shredder in front of you. Seen it done. So those are the questions to have. If they have a mortgage on it, get a copy of the mortgage statement. That way you know who I gotta talk to get payoff, and that will speed up the whole process. Because that usually takes about a week to get payoffs from these companies.
In lieu of, if you can't find the title, like in our case, the woman had passed away, we went back to the manufacturer and found out who the manufacturer was to get the VIN code for that, the HUD plate, and then petitioned the court to make the request of the title from the company who went bankrupt, which is Green Tree Discount Company. They didn't have it. The new company that went out of business didn't have it. New Res was the latest company. So once the judge saw that no one had this title, didn't exist, then he instructed PennDOT to create a new title for Grandma. Grandma passed. So once we had that title created, then we could transfer that title to the existing homeowner. Then we had to go to a messenger service and petition PennDOT to retire the title to satisfy the lender. And we also had to petition the court to remove the lien because there was a lien on the title. So like Jason said, there was a lien on the title. The judge said, well, we can't just give you a new title. We got to remove the lien. So really we have to remove the lien first and then go through the steps to get that title and recover it.
And just for all the people that are like scared right now, saying, I'll never deal with this. This is like 0.01% what he's talking about. It's very, very rare. I've only ever seen two in my life of all the homes I've done. 98% of the time, 2-3 weeks cash deal, you're done. Piece of cake. So don't be scared of these things. They're not that bad. Yes, Susan.
Can we talk about like if a owner of a park puts a brand new mobile home in the park and there is no title?
So that's when you call me, because
Yeah.
I can take care of that as well. When you have a new mobile home, there is not a title, there's a certificate of origination. Get a copy of that bad boy. Okay, that has all the information I'm gonna need on it. It's like a title, but it's not title. So when it comes from the manufacturer, whoever built this thing, sells it to the dealer, they get this origination form. And then it goes from the dealer to the mobile home park and then to your buyer. So grab that from them, get a copy of it. I'll need it at settlement so I can send that to PennDOT, and that's what PennDOT uses to create the title.
And everybody's bought a car, and the same thing with the new cars is a certificate of origin, just like Jason mentioned. You don't get a title when you go to the dealership and get a vehicle, unless it's a used vehicle. They've already created the title, so that certificate of origin. Trailers, like a little pull behind trailer, has a certificate of origin of who built it. So they all have to go to PennDOT to create that title for that first owner, and that document is how they transfer ownership to the next person that buys it. So this is very similar. We've all done that. So mobile homes are the same way. They're considered just like a car.
Now, I wanted to jump back, because there is a marked difference between a home on land versus a home in a park with the title. That title in a park, it's moving from buyer to buyer. You know, so you asked the question about, you know, is a title retired? How can you find out? You know, in a perfect world, you know, you go to the seller and they pull out a copy of the title and it's got stamped retired on it that they got directly from PennDOT. All right, excellent. Well, what happens if you don't have that? You know, I did bring in, Terry, you can pass this out, a sample of a vehicle record that you can get directly from PennDOT. You know, which if you have the information on the home, it'll tell you if there's any liens attached. And then you'll look for this stop code, and when it has M as in Mary on the stop code, that tells you right there that the title's been retired. And there's nothing else that you need to do, okay? Now, there's another way, and you can ask your title company to help you with this. There's also an endorsement that can go on the title work. It's called the Alta 7. In PA, they call it the PA 400. And when that endorsement goes on the title insurance, that is essentially the title insurer stating that this is real property, free of encumbrances, and the title's been properly retired. So in lieu, and you know, I've had to do that on pre-1976 ones. You know, you might get do a data search that comes back and no record, which if the title company will agree to it, they'll throw that endorsement on there. And then that's telling the lender, hey, the title's been retired, we're good. So there are some steps, you know, that you can do before the worst case scenario where you got to go have another title generated and issued just to turn around and retire it. So,
And that's only for mobile homes on their own land.
Right.
If it's in a park, none of that applies. There's a title. Somewhere, there's a title. If, worst case scenario, if they lost the title, you can email me, I can email you the form. Piece of cake, send it to the seller, have them fill it out, take the PennDOT, they'll print a new one, 10 days later, it'll show up in their mailbox. They no longer issue those titles on the spot. That was a change this last 2 weeks here. They'll print it, but they mail it to you for whatever address is on that title.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about titles. So one last question as far as titles go. So we know mobile homes and parks that have titles. Jason, you're extremely knowledgeable. You can handle those closings easy peasy, nice and quick. On a piece of land, title's been retired. That's your normal settlement company can handle that. It's treated just like a stick-built home. What if there's a mobile home on a piece of land and the sellers don't want to retire the title? It's not on a permanent foundation. It's just there. Is that then two separate settlements?
It is. I'm doing one right now.
How does that work?
The settlement company is doing the transfer of the land. I'm doing the transfer of the mobile home. So it's two pieces. They're providing settlement sheet, which is fine with me, great. I will do the tax certifications for the mobile home part of it, make sure everything's paid up there, and then transfer that as a vehicle. And we do it at the same time, same location, but that way both pieces get transferred. And it's not just the land where you run into a situation where Chris is.
Good to know. Okay. Chris, how do I find value on a mobile home in a park versus a mobile home on a piece of land?
Still your MLS.
Mhm.
There's still sales that are posted. Depends on, you know, the size, the age, the bedrooms, just like you do a comparison or comparative market analysis on a home, you can do the same thing. If you're buying it in a park, you know, you're gonna take into consideration also how much is the rent. Because whoever's coming in to buy that, if they're borrowing money from a lender to do a mobile home, they're also gonna consider that amount of money. So the debt to income is gonna come into play with the lender when they go to see him. But as far as figuring value, it's no different than figuring value, in my opinion, as going for a ranch house sitting on 2 acres.
Do you feel a mobile home is worth less than a stick built?
Well, feelings don't come into it, but
Good answer.
yes, because land is real property, we're dealing with something that depreciates much quicker than a home. A home appreciates, a mobile home depreciates. So just like your car, when you buy a car for $40,000 and you go trade it in, they don't give you 40,000. You're lucky to get 8. Mobile home, unless they've remodeled it and kept up with the times, it's going to depreciate. So
So can I talk on that point?
Please.
I'm not gonna argue.
Okay, go ahead.
when we had the Rona, which we won't talk about, and things went a little crazy, which we won't talk about that either. There was definitely an increase in value. I sold a mobile home twice, and each time it went up about $5,000. And so there is that aspect of it. Chris brought up the remodeling thing. Do I have any flippers in here? Wonderful.
Mhm.
I'm gonna report right to you. Don't do silly things like put ports in a mobile home, okay? Don't take a 3-bedroom and make it a 2-bedroom mobile home, or take out a bathroom. That's really, really bad. You will destroy the value of that home really quickly. Things that you can do to increase would be pull out panels, because we all know they all have, like, you know, the panel walls. Pull them out, put drywall in. That raises the value real quick. Pull the windows out, because the windows are the number one thing that leaks in that home. They are horrible windows because of weight. They gotta keep these things light so they can move them across the highways. Pull out the windows, put regular windows in there. Those two things alone jack your value way up. Take out the original, you know, like little door you can kick in, you know, with a 5-year-old, and put in a regular outdoor door. It makes these things, make the home feel more like a stick-built home and less like a mobile home. So those are, if you're talking to investors and stuff like that that are getting into it, that's the way to go.
I think there's two ways to look at, you know, from an insurance standpoint, you know, a lot of times insurance companies, especially depending on the age, they won't give replacement cost, you know, as far as the policy, they'll do actual cash value, you know, so what they're saying is, you know, we're not gonna give you what we think it is, it's gonna cost you to rebuild this, we're just gonna insure it for what we think it's worth, you know? And I also think it's a little bit of perception. Does anybody know Art Tharp, ABC Home Sales? So they've got some communities right around here. They go pretty much south central out towards Philly and up. Probably run about 35 communities right now. Art would be the first to tell you that he doesn't like to use the word manufactured housing. He calls his units, you know, he'd like to call them condos or townhomes. Because they are all very high-end communities. The price points are up pushing 200 plus. And he does it a little different, whereas he brings them into his communities, he actually does permanently affix them, even though they are on rented land, you know? So the goal being to keep these communities extremely high-end, you know, to help keep the values up. So I think there is a perception with a mobile home, you know, that people just have this in their mind that, oh my gosh, it sits on a piece of land and a tornado is going to come and it's going to seek out that, you know, that spot, you know? So, you know, that's how I kind of look at it as far as value, you know, but at the end of the day, when you're working with a buyer, you know, they want to buy what they want to buy. And mobile homes right now, it's a big part of this economy right now. You know, you would be surprised the amount of mobile homes that sell in this country. So,
And it's increasing big time, year over year for the last 2 years that I've been watching it. It has increased probably 100% every year as we're moving into, because that has become the new affordable housing. So you're newlyweds, you're just coming out of the gate, you know, got all the college debt falling you. This is the affordable housing where you can't find a decent house to move into for under 150,000. We all seen what those look like now. So this is the other option that is move-in ready, bring your stuff, start living. So you will see more and more of these as parks are scrambling to bring in new homes. That's going to add even more inventory 5 years down the road. And that's what the turnover rate looks like. These people move in, they're in the homes 3 years, 5 years, they're ready to sell us. In comparison to regular real estate, 10 or more years. Or like myself, that I'm going to die in my house, more than likely. But with these, you get in good with them. 3 years, you're reselling it. Another 3 years, you're reselling it. So keep in touch with them, because that's just continual revenue right in your pocket. And they talk to their neighbors, and they have a lot of neighbors. So that's your way to get into those doors as well.
Gary,
yes.
what is different about financing a mobile home in a park versus on land? What do you as a lender look for?
So really, the biggest difference between the two is going to be the leased land. Okay, so it's not that you can't buy a home that is on leased land or leasehold. You know, Baltimore City is a great example. You see all those row homes in Baltimore City, they're all leasehold for the most part. So, but they're 100, 200-year leases. And each loan program has guidelines in terms of how much longer past the end of the mortgage that lease has to exist. So VA is an example, 14 years. So if you're doing a 30-year VA mortgage, the lease has to extend for 44 years, okay? And when you get into a park, no park is gonna give you a lease for 44 years, in that example. So that's where, all these properties that are on leased land, that's what kicks you out of the agency financing, again, your FHA, your conventional, and puts you into the more limited mobile home and park financing. So, you have a handful of unders that are out there. You have 21st American, you have Triad, you have Tamac, Bank of Landisburg, I think, kind of does their own. We've actually started doing so many since we started offering these last year, and we're doing it on a broker basis. So I broker through Triad. I have a relationship with Credit Human, Federal Credit Union out of Texas. We're actually looking to put together kind of our own mobile home financing. So we have, in mortgage speak, you have your qualified mortgages, which are going to be your FHA, your VA. Then we have a non-qualified side or non-QM, and that could be your fix and flips, that could be your bank statement programs, anything that doesn't fit the mold, of a traditional mortgage. And that's where we're looking to place this because no one else does it. And, we started offering these types of loans about a year ago, and Jason will tell you, same thing that I did with mobile homes throughout the years, because I've been doing this for 23 years. Market was slow in the terms of inventory was low and rates were more normal. So when we started doing this, and I do it religiously once a week to this day, I go through the listings in Maryland and Pennsylvania, and I find agents that have these properties listed, and I call them, and if I don't know them, I introduce myself. And if I call 10 agents, all 10 of them talk to me. That is just hands down, and I'd already worked with Jason on some other stuff. So then when I realized that, he was really a big player in this, we kind of hit it off, but it really comes down to the land and the fact that there's ground rent, and also, the fact that that property can be moved, it doesn't have to be permanently affixed, they can buy it, they can pick it up at any time and move it. So those are the two big reasons why, everybody, they might see a mobile home, they're like, there's ground rent, can't do it.
Yeah.
You can, and it's not the most terrible process in the world, but, you just have to know the difference there.
Okay. Chris, what standard forms are different for mobile homes in parks versus land?
You're gonna have your tenant addendum, so there's a box if you fill out the agreement of sale. For mobile homes, you can use a standard agreement of sale, there's 1 to 4 mobiles, but if there's a tenant box, you gotta check, make sure you fill that out. And then the other mobile, there's another, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Jason's gonna school me, there he is, thank you, buddy. Manufactured home addendum, to standard agreement of sale, and the manufactured home addendum to listing contract. And there's a mobile home community rights notice, so, and I did that without my glasses, so it's amazing.
I will say that with a mobile home in a park, that is the most important part, is to remember that the documents are different. I won an offer that I should not have won. It was cash and we were the second lowest offer. We were not the highest offer. So when the agent called me and said that I won, I couldn't understand why. And it was because out of 7 cash offers for the same mobile home in a park, I did the correct paperwork and nobody else did.
So I just want to speak a little why this is so important. There's a standard agreement for sale of real estate, right? There's also one for manufactured homes on leased land are built specific for mobile homes in parks. I can't tell you how many times I've seen agents try and play real estate lawyers and write up their own verbiage to cover themselves. Yeah, for park approval. Like if you don't get park approval, what happens? And they try and put this stuff in here. Guess what? It's already in here. You don't have to do that, and you're not going to get sued. I saw one contract go horribly wrong. where they didn't get park approval, but they used a regular AOS. So there was no, and they didn't put any verbiage in there. Guess what? They lost their deposit.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
the way the contract's written. It wasn't anybody's fault.
You should always get park approval first. And some parks have that. Do not write an agreement of sale until you have park approval, because if their credit is questionable and the park doesn't, you don't want to lock them down and tie them into an agreement of sale. So it's very important to do that.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that, I just, am getting one under contract down in Maryland where they waited for park approval. Now, there are two things that the lending side are gonna require, they're gonna want park approval, and they're gonna want a lease agreement, generally for 12 months. So the park approval is the big thing now, depending on the park, and I want to bring up Art Tharp again because they're great with this. Generally when you're giving park approval, you're gonna look for two things. They're gonna look at kind of the credit and the finance side, then they're gonna look at the criminal side. I know a lot with arts communities, if they have a pre-approval in place from a lender, that's gonna cover that finance side for the park approval. They're just gonna say, hey, we're good, we got that. As long as they come back on the criminal side and they're clean, then we're gonna be okay with that. So, but they're exactly right, I see too many of these get under contract, they start the process, everybody's pushing, hey, get the appraisal order, let's do this, and then all of a sudden, oh, they didn't get park approved. It's like, well, what are we doing? We've just taken time, money, resources, when this should have been the first step. So, I agree, I think that park approval is very important to start.
So as agents, you need to be asking those questions. When you're working with a client, they start talking about mobile homes and parks, ask the questions. That way you're not out there spinning your tires, wasting your time. Ask, do they have any bankruptcies? You got any kind of criminal charges? What's your grade look like? Kind of stuff. Ask about dogs. How many dogs do you have? What kind of dogs do you have?
I mean,
If they're running around with Cujo, you're not gonna get them in the park. If they claim to have a service dog, they have to disclose that to the park. I was literally, my first deal of this year,
Hey.
we had a gentleman that was trying to buy a mobile home in a park from the park. He had done everything. We were at settlement. We signed all the titles. I was making copies and he starts running his mouth about how he has his service dog.
Never
That he
told
didn't
me.
tell anybody. And he had the service dog. And park manager's like, does he got documentation? And then he lost his mind and the entire thing blew up and park said, pretty much, you're out of the park. We're not dealing with you. You've lost your park approval. So that killed everything right there. And I got up New Year's Day for nothing. Let's not do that. It was New Year's Day.
I think it was.
First
like
and
the
second,
Yeah,
it
it
was
was the
our-
first week of, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry,
Right,
Jason,
so
I
ask-
didn't know either.
Ask those questions, please, and save us all a headache.
Yeah, and I would have to think all of you are not gonna go out and show somebody a traditional home without knowing that they've spoken to a lender or verified if they're gonna be a cash buyer. And you're certainly not gonna submit an offer unless you have a copy of the pre-approval. So this is really no different, think of kind of the park approval as your pre-approval, at least one of the facets of it. That, because you can't have one without the other, so.
Right, but what happens when you have multiple offers and you can't guarantee that your client is going to get that home and they just paid $100 in park approval fees?
Roll the dice.
So
Yeah.
I'm under the impression of getting my offer accepted first.
A lot of parks, from what I've dealt with, they want to see that offer in hand before they will take your credit application.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I would
in
say a
that
lot of parks
contract,
Need the contract before they'll even do the park
Right.
approval.
in the contract, in the part that talks about park approval, the way it's verbiage is you have 5 days to submit your application to the park. A lot of agents will call me in a panic and be like, it's day number 6, I don't have my park approval. I said, you're okay. As long as you get that application into the park within 5 days of the contract date, and you're okay, because most of them take 10, some take longer. It all depends when you're dealing with corporate entities, as the park manager will call them, which is really Bill sitting in the back room looking over everything, but he's been out fishing for the last couple of days. It's all right, you'll get there. I've done deals where it's like closing day and we finally get the park approval. Okay, here we go. So I will start my end of things and take the risk on getting all the tax assessments, because yes, they cost money, they cost me money, prior to getting that park approval. But please do me a favor, ask the questions so we're not wasting time and money.
Do you feel that with the high lot rents that, because we've seen in parks, lot rents are increasing, they're going up. Do we feel that that is killing the value of the homes within those parks?
A lot of it, and this is just my guesstimate, I think a lot of it is the parks coming in, such as the older parks that have the older homes in them. They're raising the park rents to clean up the people that are living there, to clean up some of those homes. A lot of parks around will have certain limits on how old of a home you can have in the park. And when it hits that expiration date, you either need to sell that home, get it out of there, or they're gonna buy it, demo it, and bring in something new. Just so they can stay up and current and keep a nice group of people in there.
Yeah, I think that's, you and I have talked about this, one is you kind of look at, if you're looking for a rental, rental rates certainly are higher, and you don't own anything, you're just paying the landlord. So, you look at financing a mobile home in a park, so you have your mortgage on it, you have your insurance, your taxes, if any, and then you have your ground rent. So you have to kind of weigh the balance between the two and see which makes sense for you. But where I was going with this is, and what I've really started to learn, as I've really gotten into these park homes, these parks, especially the newer ones, the goal is to keep these parks nice and attract people. And one of the things that I've taken to my folks as we look to create something for this, and this is astounding to me because sometimes I feel like the lending side is a little more strict, but there is very little abandonment and foreclosure activity in a lot of these parks, because the last thing a park wants to see is a home go abandoned or foreclosed and moved out of that park. So these parks that are run correctly, if they realize that there's an issue, a lot of times they'll step in and they'll take care and they'll satisfy, a mortgage or any lien that's on there. And, they'll either kind of clean it up and they'll just resell it, so I think from that standpoint, as far as value goes, you're not going to go into a park, in my opinion, and see a bunch of foreclosure and abandonment signs. I think you're going to find they're occupied, they're kept correctly, they're neat, and the park's going to do everything they can to kind of hold that value up.
There's one other point I want to bring up before we get off the topic of special forms, because I see this a lot. Listing agents, when you list a home, get in contact with the park office, get their rules and regulations, get them up on the other documents, on the MLS. That way they're out there. Here's the one everybody forgets. Anybody tell me what the Manufactured Home Community Rights Act notice is? This little guy? It's a seller and buyer signed document. What it states is that the seller gave the buyer this. This is what governs mobile home parks. These are their rules and regulations laid out by Pennsylvania legislature. So this document should be on every listing. So it's there that can get conveyed to the buyer. And then this gets signed by buyer and seller. This is also part of the agreement of sale. I think page 9 or 10. There's a little spot where they initial. Yeah. So I have this. If you want to make a copy of it, you can go online and Google it and get the PDF and print it off 15-page document. But that way your butt's covered.
Is that document in place of the home disclosure, home seller disclosure, or it's different?
It's an addition to.
Yep.
Addition.
Yep, addition to. So, okay.
There's things in here that you definitely get a chance to read over it so you're aware. I had a park once that was selling a mobile home. And we closed in the middle of the month and they wanted that buyer to pay for the entire month. You cannot do that. I had that checked with lawyers, absolutely cannot do it. Went back to the park and said, sorry, that's not the way this works. And they were very thankful that they did not get their butts sued. So something like that, be aware. But that's why you hire somebody like me for settlement to make sure that parks don't do anything stupid like that.
Chris, what inspections are the most important that should be considered when purchasing a mobile home?
Home inspection still, that's still the most important thing you want to do. With it being metal, I don't know, you got to worry about wood, termites and things of that nature. But, you know, you had mentioned earlier, Mary did about, or Jason did, I'm not sure who, about the windows leaking and the doors and the skylights and, you want to have someone that crawls underneath there and make sure that, does it have piers? You know, is it properly?
Is it strapped?
Exactly, is it strapped? Because for insurance reasons, we know that every tornado is gonna hit a mobile home park. It seems like. So is it strapped down?
Can you tell that just by looking at it?
It has little straps coming off the frame into the piers.
So a pier, it's actually,
It has to be attached to a pier?
yeah, the one that I have listed and pending right now is we had to dig a 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot hole and fill it with concrete. We had to take pictures to prove that that's what it was for the inspector. There's actually an engineer who will come out and will verify that it's strapped down for the lender. They want that proof. So it's a structural engineer comes out and verifies that, yes, that home is strapped down.
Yes. So is it one pier that's underneath it, or
It
it could be
could
several,
be
and they
several
all have to
sizes.
be?
No, it just one at each angle. So in this case, it was a double wide. So they had to have one at one corner and one at the other. With the home attached in the center, but they wanted that strap to be one in each corner.
Your newer homes in parks will have that. Parks are requiring it now, so they don't look, you know, they don't show up on national news after a tornado. Nobody wants to see that.
If it's a tornado, it's gonna rip it apart anyway.
Now, as far as the lending side, you know, and some lenders may be different where they have some additional overlays, but generally the rule of thumb is from a mobile home on land, when you're dealing with your traditional, your FHA, your conventional, FHA is always going to require a structural inspection. You have to have it. VA does not. Conventional does not, unless there is an addition built onto the original unit.
VA doesn't do mobile homes. They don't even try. They will not do.
So, so just make sure you know that, and you know, the appraiser is also going to know, you know, anytime an appraiser goes out there and they see something and they think it's going to be an issue, they can put it in their report, and that's going to trigger it, you know, so, so just keep that, you know, as far as any other inspections, you know, when it's on a well and septic, that's still going to fall under the guidelines of, if it's FHA, you got to make sure the distance, you know, is up to code, you know, 10 feet from the property line. Well is 50 feet from the septic and 100 from the drain field. It can be grandfathered in if it's a little older, but you know, if you're getting older in age and mobile homes, then you might be running into a different problem. So,
Check to make sure the home has heat tape. And right now you're going, what's heat tape? Heat tape goes around the exposed pipes that are underneath the mobile home to keep them from freezing. A lot of those, you plug them in, and when it hits a certain temperature, it'll kick on. It's just warm enough to keep them from freezing up. So there's nothing worse than you're trying to be underneath a mobile home in a dead of winter with a hairdryer trying to unfreeze your line. And that's where a lot of your mobile home fires start, because people will put all kinds of things underneath that home that should not be there, like those big blowtorch furnace things, and next thing you know, your insulation's on fire and your home's gone in about 5 minutes.
One thing I learned the hard way, when we were looking at houses for selling land and stuff, you always check flood zone, but I've learned always make sure that the park isn't in a flood zone either. That's another reason for tie down, other than tornadoes, is it doesn't float away. But when you're getting financing on a mobile home in a park, you do have to also make sure it's not in a flood zone.
Yes. Caravan Court in Middletown is in a flood zone. They've had water as high as 1 step below the door to get into them. So just be aware of that. Now, the upper end of the park is not. So it's just right along there where the drainage is off the turnpike. If you ever been in that park, they put in all kinds of new drainage. Supposedly it's there to help. It has not been tested yet, so we'll see.
There's a park in Newport, the entire park is in a
Is
flood.
it? Okay.
It sits in a bowl, it's just flood.
Nice.
Mary, do you have a question about interest rates?
I do not, but
So interest rates on a mobile in a park compared to a mobile that's retired on land.
yeah,
Can
absolutely.
you talk about the difference in rates?
Sure. So if you're talking strictly your park mobile homes, you know, from what I'm seeing, your rates are going to start, you know, 9%. for the current and up from there for the current rate sheet that I have. So they're gonna be tiered in two ways, you know. Well, two factors are gonna tier those rates. You're gonna have down payment and your credit score. So think of the best tier is gonna be 760 and above for one of the lenders that I use, and they pull only the TransUnion, so they're not doing a traditional tri-merge like we would for, say, an FHA loan. So 760 and above, and then let's say you're at 5% down payment, you know, your rate, you know, is gonna be 9.05%. And if you put 10% down, maybe it's 9, put 20% down, maybe you're at 8.9%. So that next bucket down is gonna be a credit score that falls 720 to 759. So now that rate's gonna tick up a little higher, you know. Then you get to 680 to 719, you know, that rate's gonna tick up a little higher, you know. If you start getting down to 600 or below that, then, you know, you're looking at 12, 13%, okay? Other things other than just credit score and loan to value when a park could go into rate. I have a gentleman that I have in approved status. He has a 720 something credit score, but he's just shy of 3 years from a bankruptcy discharge. So they put him into their bronze program. The rate's like 12.4%. So has that, in that case, it really has nothing to do with the credit score. It's more of the fact that he had a major derogatory item on his credit report. If you, when you're looking at ones that are on land, you know, FHA has what they call a low level price adjuster to the rate for a mobile home. So you might, someone who buys a regular home, stick-built home, and let's say their rate is 7%, you might be at 7.25, 7.5 if it's a mobile home because of that adjuster. Going to work the same for conventional, other than there is an aspect of conventional financing and it's tied into the median income for the area. So if I were to use Franklin County, where I do a lot of business, median income runs about $98,000, let's say. 80% of the median income is about 73,000. So if you are at or below 100% of the median income and you're doing conventional, all the adjusters go away, including the manufactured home adjusters. So they treat it just as a stick-built home. If the income's higher and you're buying a manufactured home, you're also going to get hit with a low level pricing adjuster because it's a manufactured home. So in some cases, but not all on the land, they could be a little higher because it's a manufactured home, but not always.
So I see a lot of deals with a lot of different lenders. And I can tell you up front, Gary has the best rates around. Call Gary first. There's another company out there that's much more popular that everybody seems to go to. Their last 3 deals that I've closed are over 14% interest. So be aware of that. Work with your buyer. Try and get them to Gary first. Okay.
Well, I think that's true of any sale. When you're dealing with your client is.
Give them Gary first. Okay, yeah. Awesome.
Is sometimes you should be shopping around because there's a lot of difference. It could be thousands of dollars out of pocket or thousands of dollars that over the term of the loan. It could be difference because you just went with they went with their whatever the bank is. So if you could save them, because sometimes, you know, they don't have enough money in pocket and the deal falls apart. Why not shop it around a little bit and call here?
The one that I just closed, they borrowed, and I always spend a lot of time going over this with buyers because I don't work for the bank. I want them to know what they just got themselves into. They borrowed $45,000 from the bank roughly. Their interest, just interest over the 25 years was over $100,000. They've been paying back $145,000 on a single wide mobile home. And I tell them, you will not get that for that home, ever. Get it paid off quick. Get it down so you're not paying any interest.
Well, and I will say one more thing, and that's, you guys mentioned a great point. On your traditional manufactured homes on land, you can do a 30-year note. Okay, on the loans that are going to be in the parks, they're not going to go out that long. They're going to do anywhere from a 10 to a 25-year term. But the conversation I also have with everyone is, you know, at some of these price points, there's not a market difference between a 25-year payment and a 20-year payment, you know? So you look to see, and these lenders do have rather forgiving debt to income ratio guidelines. You know, they'll allow a buyer to go up to about as high as 48% on their debt to income ratio. So, I mean, if you're buying a home in a park and you're getting it for 80,000, you know, and you're putting 5 or 10% down and you're looking at the payment, here's a 25-year note, here's a 20-year note, there's not much difference, you know? So you can kind of help speed the process up and pay a little less interest just by simply, because it's going to be markedly different than if you're buying a $300,000 home and you're looking at a 30-year versus a 20-year. That's going to be sizably different, you know, you're not going to see it as much on some of these park homes.
Anybody else have any other questions?
I do. So if you have a brand new mobile home and say it's a 2023, and then next year, you know, how much does it depreciate over time? Do you have like a percentage or anything?
It really comes down to how it's treated.
Okay,
I mean, I've seen newer 2020s, 21s, 22s that have been lived in for a couple of years. They took really good care of them. And with the climate the way it is, they're still getting, you know, within $1,000 to $5,000 from the list price. So yeah, it really is going to come down to that. A lot of the appraisers out there are the banks that use Datacom for mobile homes because they're about the only one around that doesn't. They tend to look more in the park before they venture outside of the park to look at comps. So when you're, as listing agents, when you're comping out a mobile home, try and stay in the park as much as possible before you get outside. You'll be closer on with your appraisal.
so another question though, say you have the newest one in there, like the newest mobile home, there's no comps.
I would go back to a list price called manufacturer, find out what the pricing was on it, and
Okay.
start from that and work your way down.
Yeah, so I have one right now up in Lock Haven where it's brand new. They bought it from Lebanon Valley Homes and they placed it in the park. So we're not doing an appraisal. We were able to get a copy of the actual dealer invoice. So what the lenders will do is they'll take that, and sometimes you gotta be careful with that because a lot of these parks can buy in bulk and they'll really reduce, you know, what they're paying for the property, the unit versus what they're gonna sell it for. But the lenders like Triad has a calculation and they will use, here's the invoice price. They'll use like 135% of that plus permit fees, plus cost for setting and everything. And then they'll come up with a value. And as long as you're in line with, you know, what the sales price is, then they'll use that in lieu of having to even get an appraisal. So that's going to be for your newer ones. You know, when you're on your existing ones, you're typically going to have an appraisal, but you know, same thing. I had one down in Nottingham, PA, which is in Chester County, and the sales price was 120. Datacom came back. The guy was at 116, but he pulled. Now this wasn't in a park; it was just on rented land, and the appraiser pulled comps from Cecil County, Maryland, so he didn't even stay in PA. And so my agent's like, dude, I got 10 comps right here. So I sent them over and lo and behold, it came back at 130, 131, excuse me. So you got to keep an eye on them too, just the same, because one thing Datacom does, and Datacom, it seems like every order they come to me and they say, I don't think this value is realistic. I'm like, okay, just, you know, so we pull a little information, we send them out, and a lot of times we're fine. So.
I've got something, I'm sorry, I'm coming in a little late, so you might have already.
By the time you show up.
Hi. So, and this is just a learning experience that I had, but it wasn't something that I ever even thought of. Maybe talked about some of the dates now in our question after. So obviously the date of like 1976 for properties on land. Well, I had one here just not long ago. The date actually on the title that was being retired was 77. But then come to learn that the electrical panel was being changed the exact same day that the appraiser was there, found a sticker on the actual electric panel that said production date was March of 76. Come to learn that the deadline for production is what, June or July?
June 15th.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So literally we were like weeks away. So we were days, and all of a sudden then the underwriter got into, well, I would have never had a reason to question it. The title literally said 77.
That's when it was titled.
That's when it was titled.
Right.
So, I had absolutely at that point, nobody was telling me it was a 77. And I didn't look at the falling apart little sticker on electrical panel that was taken off and a new one was on there and it was still in the closet. Like, I didn't look at this thing that was ratty. Well, then we got the phone call to, hey, go double check and find exactly when it was produced. And we were literally weeks. We were weeks away from being completely legal. And of course, FHA completely fell apart.
So I'll kind of piggyback on that and kind of go back to something we talked about earlier. You know, so June 15th, 1976, that is the day that HUD's manufactured housing guidelines began. Okay, so every home from that point on has been through, you know, built to those guidelines. Can you do financing on a pre-1976? Yep, I have a program for it. It's 30% down. It's a
Exactly.
15-year term.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've done one. So, you know, we talked a little earlier about the HUD tags, the little metal plates, okay? If it's a single wide, there's one. If it's double wide, there's two. You just gotta find them. Sometimes they're removed, sometimes they're wallpapered over, anything. So that's gonna tell you at least that you're in the ballpark as far as the date, okay? Now, if the appraiser can't find them, you know, underwriting is gonna want them. So I wanted to mention that there is a service, if anybody is familiar with it, it's an IBTS letter. Yep. Which is for the Institute of Building Technology, IBTS.org. You know, if you're missing those HUD tags, you'll order an IBTS letter. If you do it in regular turn time, it might cost you like $75. If you need it like that afternoon or the next day, it's gonna run you about $175. Yeah. So all is not lost, you know, if you don't have those tags on there. You know, there are some other steps, but yeah, the date is always going to be the big one. And then I know for the lenders that I use with the mobile homes in the parks, they follow the same guideline as far as when that property was built. You know, it has to be that June 15, 76 or after. You know, anything older than that, then you're running into some issues. You know, you're either cash or, you know,
Like you said, the 30% down or the 25% down
Correct.
for an old single wide on a foundation on a little piece of land.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it's fair talk, you know, from the land standpoint, just also be careful of the homes that have been rebuilt. I think we talked a little bit about that, you know, for whatever reason, and I say this because a lot of people just don't realize it, but you know, there may have been a mobile home there. And maybe they leave the original frame or the tongue, and then they put this beautiful house around it, you know? And guess what? Like I said earlier, if it walks like a duck, it's mobile homes, you know? And, you know, if it's that original single wide that was there was a 1965, now you've got this beautiful new home, it's still a 1965 mobile home, you know? And there's, other than do cash or some really creative financing, there's not too much you're gonna be able to do with it, so.
But if you have the buyer, and you're in a situation like that, you want that retired title, you want to know that that was a trailer mobile home, because when they go to sell it, that's where the problem's gonna come in. Is make sure you're representing your client well, not putting them in a bad position down the road.
If you have a buyer that starts talking about, hey, I'm gonna buy this mobile home and I'm gonna move it, you need to have a serious conversation with them. Cost of moving a mobile home is $7,000 per section, depending on mileage. The other issue that you run into, if they ever want to sell that property and they've moved that mobile home, good luck, it's cash sale only. I don't know of any financing programs out there will do a mobile home once it's been moved because of the structural integrity of that. Leave it alone, buy a new one, put it on the property. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, I would say the other thing, if there's ever a question as to whether it used to be or was a mobile home, you know, all the localities are pretty good. They keep the electronic tax cards, but I would give you a little hint. They don't always give the best information or all of the information. If you get there, you can get into the office and have them pull the original handwritten tax card. It a lot of times will have more information, and it could answer the question quite easily if at one time on that parcel that there was a mobile home that was parked there, you know, and may save you a lot of time and frustration, potentially money, you know, depending on how far you get into something. When that all comes up and it gets to the underwriter, they're like, heck no. So,
I know we're probably running short on time. There's one thing I want to talk about real quick that I get a lot of calls on. And people want to know what do closing costs look like, because I know you guys have to provide that when you go, before you write up that offer or present it
We're talking in a park.
in a park.
Yep.
This is park only, okay? Couple things. There's no transfer tax, 0. So don't put 6% on there. There's no sales tax and there's no transfer tax. So that doesn't need to be there. You're gonna prorate the taxes. You're gonna prorate the lot rent for them. You're gonna add on my settlement fee. If it's a cash sale, there's PennDOT's fee right now, $67. And then you'll add in your broker fee on the buyer side. Seller side, you have commission amounts, broker fee, tax certifications, estimate $50. Unless you're in one of those crazy districts like I'm doing right now, there's 5 tax collectors. And they all want their own certification fee. So figure on 50. Yeah, and you have prorations of, again, your lot rent taxes. And hopefully there's nothing hidden from the park or from a tax collector you don't know about. Because that's my job to find that. I know everybody knows that I do settlements. What makes me a little different than settlement companies? I'm also a card agent with PennDOT. So I do the title work myself, rather than you having to go out to a messenger service or something like that after settlement. I come to you, I do everything right here, like a normal settlement. Everybody goes on their separate ways. Okay, I do that for cash sales, I do it for mortgages. So if you got a mortgage company that says, oh, you don't need a settlement person, you're probably not gonna get a settlement sheet, which I know you need to get paid, right? That's why you call me. And I'll make sure that everything gets done the way it's supposed to get done. I recently did a deal just past year, it was out of your York office, where it was gonna be a cash sale, quick and done, piece of cake. And the seller did not want to use the settlement company. It got me involved. Well, yeah, it turned out they had $5,000 that was due to back taxes and the lot that the new buyer would have inherited, because when you buy the home, you buy the taxes. So do your seller or your buyers a favor, have you sell the company.
yeah, and there's no change to, as far as on land, the closing costs that you can get covered by the seller if you have a buyer. So if you're going FHA, 6%. Conventional, 3 to 5% down, you're at 3%, 10% to 20%, you're at 6%. If you're doing 25% down, you get 9%. On the loans that we do that are in a park, buyer can pay for their settlement cost out of pocket. If the home does appraise higher than what the sales price is, there generally is room where they can finance in cost and do it that way, or that they can have the seller, and there's no percentage cap, like your traditional loan. So if there's 5,000 in fees and the seller wants to pay them all, they just pay them all, if they work that kind of deal. So yeah, and I will tell you too, just to piggyback Jason a little bit, I would never say anything ill about anybody. I've done these deals with title companies, they get them done. They're not doing them every day though, and there is a nuance to it, and it's about having someone who's familiar with the process and the closers of the particular lender and how they're going to get them the docs and how they're going to get them the docs back and the whole title piece, it makes it easier. And I've kind of gone out of my way and kind of made it a little non-negotiable, I don't fight it. Someone says, no, I want to use my local. I'm like, okay, we'll do it. And then they're emailing me like, well, what do we do now? I'm like, I don't know, you're a closer, so, but it does make it easier, especially from the title piece, because if we're using someone here local, try it as an example, they want you to use Brimmer Title Service. And they charge an extra fee. And then, or, you got to send it into them, and it's this whole long process when it can just be handled nice and easy and done in a much more expedited manner.
Getting kickbacks from each other or something?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you guys. If nobody else has any other, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Chris, maybe let everybody know like how you figure out your commission, like how you decide commission for your.
Depends on the sale price, is gonna determine that. If it's on land, mobile and land, I'll just 6%, 3 and 3. But ultimately, it's up to the seller as to how they want to handle the commissions, That's the world that we live in as real estate agents now, so, realize what is your minimum that you're gonna work for. So I don't work for any less, oops, sorry, I don't work for any less than 3%. If it's a low price, say mobile selling for $20,000, what's my minimum? I sold a mobile and I told I worked for $2,500. That's what my fee is. So even though we were selling the mobile for 20,000, if you want me to handle it, that's what it costs for me to do it. If you want it for less, there's lots of other agents out there that can do it for less. So you determine what your worth is.
I had one question about the IBTS
Mhm.
and where that comes into play. I had a situation where I believed, and even the lender, they use a title company prior, believed it was a modular home.
Mhm.
Once the appraiser went out and he says, I've been doing this for 30 years, I know what it looks like, et cetera, and it did have metal framing. And they said, this is a mobile home all day.
Mhm.
So that point, the lender required a structural engineer to come in, and he said, yes, this is a mobile home, it needs welded. So my client not only paid for structural engineer, but then also paid for the welding to take place, only to still not be able to get what they needed to confirm modular mobile until it was finally brought to our attention about IBTS.
Mhm.
Now I will use that first. I was like, why did you tell us about this? Because at that point, what happened was IBTS said, there's no HUD plate because it's a modular home.
Modular home, that's it.
So at that point, the appraiser had to go back on his plan and we welded a frame to, I have no idea what. So I guess my question really is if you're really that unsure, is that the first step you can just take then?
I have a colleague in New York that's right or wrong orders an IBTS on every mobile home that she does.
Okay.
And her name is Sue Reed, if anybody's ever worked with her, and she is just a massive, massive, massive producer, but that's just her process.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
it should save my client over $1,000.
Right.
If that's what we had to rush it, which is how I knew that fee, because that's what we had to pay, I was like, we could have just paid the 75 in the beginning. Or the 125, I don't really care at this point, to save them almost $1,200.
And that's kind of her philosophy, and I had this conversation, it's like, you know, like, the hot tags are right there. She's like, uh-huh, I'm like, okay. You know,
Okay.
it's just that, and it, you know, we always talk value, and it's that kind of that added value, you know, that's, you know, I will, you know, very funny story. The very first mobile home I did was back in 2006 when I was with Wells Fargo. And I get all the way through this process and I'm doing it and I get underwriting and they're like, well, where's the title or the status of the title? I'm like, what are you talking about? The title work came in a week ago. We're ready to go. They're like, no, the title. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? And I'm like, wait, it's car? You know, so it's just sometimes you take some of these added steps, even if it costs you an extra 75 or $100. That way you're not costing yourself thousands or God, heaven forbid the deal falls apart, you know? So, and then there's one other thing I would say, you know, because we just mentioned, you know, some of these lower price points. You know, a home is a home, a unit is a unit, you know, and that's how I look at it. You know, and I've had people say to me, you just did it, you just worked on a deal for $40,000. I'm like, absolutely. I sure did, you know, because I met two agents that I'd never worked with before. I helped a homeowner get into a house, you know, and I took the time to do it, you know, made a little money on it. Great, but you know, it's just you're developing relationships. And I will tell you, I track everything. So I keep referral sheets at the office, you know, and I month by month by month. And I consistently receive calls from agents and or buyers. And buyers are telling me they got my name from an agent and I have no idea who that person is, you know? And it just turns out it was no, it's from this person that you cold called, you know, because I had a listing, you know, 2 weeks ago. So look, we're in a low inventory environment still. Rates are still a little more normal than we'd like them to be. This is a absolutely massive growing segment of the business. You know, don't poo-poo it because it's not a glamorous $400,000 home. You know, it's, you know, you use this opportunity to build relationships with other people, you know, in your business. And it goes a long way,
Yep.
so.
Well, back to what April had said about the IBTS is here, 4, 5, 6 months ago, at the brokerage level, we required if you're listing a home, you have a deed, right? And the reason for that is because of all the issues that have resulted by not looking at the deed. Agents were getting lazy. They weren't verifying, were they really selling the right property? Were there any right of ways, easements, things of that nature, restrictions? So this is just another case of one step as a real estate agent that you show value to your client and to the agents on the other side that I got my crap together. I have everything that I need. I know everything about this property, and that's why I charge the fee that I do. And so don't make yourself irrelevant as a real estate agent. Is prove your worth, do your homework, get the documents that you need so that you're not stuck into a deal for 2 years like I've been. I had the IBTS and the client still argued. So sometimes you'll have those deals that happen like that. But back to what Susan said, she asked, what do I charge? You never know if a deal is going to take a year or 2 years and how much work it's going to take. I've done deals for less money as well. Like Gary said, I met some people, I've got a little bit of money. That's great. But sometimes you're going to get stuck in these deals where you're working on them for a year and what's your time worth too. So put in the time before you do the listing, have all the associated docs necessary, have all the documents like Jason was talking about with regards to mobiles that are in parks, have all that worked out ahead of time. It'll make the transition and the transaction that much smoother.
And with that, we will end our training.
I have cards back here if you would like.
Thank
one.
you, everybody.
And grab one.
That was great.